All right, so today we are going to be doing this really cute ornament painting and for Christmas, and I'm using the Liquitex basic paints. So all only in the primary colors, and that's really all I'm going to always be using. First thing we're going to do is take a canvas. I'm using an 8x10 and I'm painting over a painting my daughter made. She gave me permission. She doesn't like them and she said I paint over it. So I'm taking just the black and a large flat brush. So any kind of brush will do, and we're just going to paint it black. So I'm just getting my black paint and covering the whole canvas with black. You might want to have a blow dryer handy because sometimes it is a little easier to go through the process if your paints are easier to dry. And hitting it with a blow dryer makes it go a little quicker. So if you're in a crunch for time, like I understand, and just make sure you have a blow dryer handy when you're doing your little projects. This is so much fun. So this one's really easy. It might look a little intimidating, but it's, you know, the shapes are really easy. We got circles and it's no big deal. No big deal at all. And I just like to make sure when I'm painting the canvas black that I don't see any more white, but it doesn't need to be way too thick. You just want to make sure it's fully covered. So sometimes I'll kind of go back and forth over it just to make sure it's covered. And then I'm going to hit it with the blow dryer to make the process go a little quicker. Now we're almost covered. This is a great way. These little 8x10 panels are really inexpensive, and it's a great way to get, if you're just practicing or, you know, learning, it's a really great little practice to do, and it will save you on time a bit. I also do some stuff on paper, which I'll do some more of, which is, again, is more affordable than a large wrapped canvas. Those are fun to do too, but it's, you know, it's a little more time consuming and a little more expensive. So once you're done with this, you're going to just take it, you know, put it in a water cup and put it aside. I usually have a couple cups of water especially when I do a black canvas, and then I'm going to blow dry this. All right, so that's all done. You'll know that it's done. You know, it's a little bit sticky to touch, but if I wipe my finger on it like that, there should be no black coming off. And then you know you're good to go. So once you're good here, we're going to go ahead and switch our brushes. I am going to use a Filbert. I like using these when I'm painting on like smaller surfaces. It's just a preference. I like the rounded tip. But you could use a square, something like this, or a round brush, something like this, which I'll probably use for a few different things too, but I'm just going to use this one right now. And I'm going to go ahead and start with my red and yellow colors for the ornaments to just place them. So the first thing I'm going to do is do my yellow. So I'm going to take my yellow ornament. And I want to position this one, like if we find the middle, I like to find the middle. If any of you painted with me before, I'm always like, where's the middle of the canvas? So if we find the middle, I want to come just a little bit down into the left from that space. And I always, when I'm painting on a black canvas, I always want to mix a little bit of white into my color that I'm using. So I mix a little bit of white and yellow together. And this will make it more opaque. So, and it will take a couple layers, so be patient with this black canvas painting process. It does take a little bit of layers, but all we're going to do is make a circle. And I'm not making it that big. That way I have space to put, you know, other fun stuff in the painting. I'm just doing a circle and then coloring it in. Notice I'm not really too worried about making it 100% perfect. That's because I'm going to be outlining the whole thing with the darker colors, and then we can add like a tiny little rectangle type, or just like a little shape coming up out of the top like that for the top of the ornament. Now, once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and mix my red in to my yellow to make more of an orange color. So you can have yellow, red, and a little bit of white. And this is going to give me kind of an orangey color, which is what I want. And this one's going to go a little bit more up here. So if I'm in the center, I'm going to go a little bit up and to the right. And I'm going to do a similar size. Circle. And then you're going to give it a little top, just like the yellow one. Beautiful. So now I have two little ornaments. They're going to get better, trust me. And then the next one is going to be my reddish one, which I don't really need to clean the brush. I just don't do it when I'm painting. This is just how I like to create. I'm just going to move over here and do more of a red and white. It's okay if a little bit of yellow is in there, but I want it to be predominantly red and white. If you feel like you need to clean your brush, you can totally do that. Make sure your brush is really dry though, before you go ahead and make your pink. And then that one's going to go almost like overlapping on this yellow one. It's going really close to the edge and it's a little bit bigger. So see how I'm going a little higher. It's just coming out of this yellow one. They're friends. And I'm just going to pretend like it's a little bit behind maybe. So I'm going to paint around it. But I'm really close to the edge, but leave a little bit of space. Don't go too crazy. And then don't forget to give it that little top. Okay, so now we have those, and we're going to start to build in our little leaves. So I'm going to clean this brush, and I'm still going to use this one. I'm just going to clean it. We want these to dry. Just let them look kind of ugly for a second, and then dry your brush all the way with your towel or whatever you got going on. So I dry it all the way. And then I'm going to go in and add my green. So for our green, we're going to use yellow and blue. And again, you could be using really any brush for this. It just kind of depends on what you like. And I want to add a little bit of white. Because again, when I do my first layers on my black canvas, I like to have that as a base coat because it really helps the colors pop against the black. And then what I'm going to do is pretend that there's a, like coming right out of the top center. I'm going to use the edge of the brush lightly, just barely touch, just to give a guide. And it's going to go across like the top like that. And then maybe it's going to cut through, and maybe I'll do a couple little things like this. And then we have some coming out from under, just around like that. So see how I've just created some little lines, and then I'm going to add like lots of like feathering brush strokes coming out of that. Little wispy ones. So I like to push a little harder at first, and then I release pressure as I swoosh over. And don't worry too much about it looking finished yet. You just want to get that texture in there. And then we'll add more layers to make it look more three-dimensional. But for this first layer, just make sure you have a good green mix. I love painting these kinds of things. Now, when you're using a brush, whether it's a square or a filbert, notice how the paint can gather right where the metal and the bristles meet. This will automatically puff up your tip. If you simply squeeze out the excess paint, you're going to get a much sharper tip on your brush. It's going to pull the bristles together and then just get it on the tip. And this will give you a little bit more control over those lines. Now, I don't really care for this one particularly. I'm not trying to get really thin lines, But if you want a little more control and command and you want to practice a little bit, this is a way to do it. Just check your brush, make sure if you need to reshape it that you do. And then just make sure the paint isn't gathering up at the base of the brush where the metal and the bristles meet, and then that'll help you get a better tip. And it doesn't matter what size brush you're using. Those things just happen. And I hope you're all ready for Christmas. But this is a great way to make like your own little decorations around the house. I like making my own little decorations because they have more personal meaning and a little more uniqueness rather than just getting something that's mass produced, which, I'm not totally against that either. I mean, sometimes there's cute stuff that is mass produced, but it's fun to have some little handcrafted stuff as well. So notice I'm just filling these in. You should have a decent amount in there. And then as you're filling it in, you can begin to add some maybe more yellow. So like if I add more yellow into my green, it's going to create a lighter shade, maybe even a little more white. More yellow and white is going to create like a different vibe for my green. And then I can begin to layer that over. But I'm not covering the first layer all the way. It's just an addition. I'm just adding to it to create depth so that it doesn't just look like one shade of green. Notice how when I layer this in, I don't put it over every single brush stroke. I layer it on top, but I'm kind of jumping around a little bit so that the other color, you could still see it. Oops, I got a little too much blue in that. But that's okay. These things are going to happen. No big deal. But I want that lighter shade to kind of pop out. You might hear my dog bark from time to time. She does not care that I'm doing a video. I try to explain to her before. Try to be quiet for just a little bit. Doesn't care. Let's see how now it looks a little bit more fun and feathered out. Now, since we've done that, it's going to create an opportunity for us to go in and add more layers to our ornaments, which are pretty dry by now. So I'm going to clean the brush. Probably just going to be using this one for a lot of the time. Then I'm going to go in and add another coat. So for the yellow one, I'm just going to add more yellow, maybe just a tiny bit of red to make a warmer shade of yellow. So see how that's just getting a little bit deeper? I kind of want this deeper shade of yellow. And now that I have a base coat, I can just, without adding white, maybe add just a tiny bit of white. You don't really need to have too much. You can go directly on top of your first layer. And notice how now the color is going to get much richer. And that is what I want. Okay. And then we're going to do the same thing to the orange. I'm just going to add another coat of orange. And it can be slightly different. And then last but not least, the red. So I have red and white, maybe a little bit of white, maybe a little extra red to make it a little darker if you want. So, on your second layer, you can always use less white if you want, because you already have a base coat of white. But you might need another layer with the white, depending on how your first layer went. So if it was really streaky and you could still see a lot of that black canvas showing behind, maybe you use more white. So it kind of depends on your canvas and what's going on for you as well. But see how now I have a little bit brighter colors. Super good. Now I'm going to add the color for the top of the ornaments, which is going to be kind of like a gray blue-ish color. So I'm just cleaning the brush. And I'm going to leave it in there. I'm going to do a smaller brush for this part. You can use like a small square or small round brush. I'm just going to use this little small square. And I'm going to make a very light, so it's like mostly white. Maybe just a teeny tiny bit of black. Don't do, so it kind of looks silverish. And then a teeny tiny bit of blue. So it doesn't look too drab and gray. I love this blue. I love blue, black, and white mixed together in various amounts. It's a good color. And then I'm just going to go to the top of these little guys and make those look like that color. Just little tiny pulls on the top so that it looks like we have this little cap to the ornament. And then while that dries, you can go back in and layer more on your pine. So, you know, and maybe switch your brush. So maybe I'll use the smaller square brush for this part. Again, clean and dry every time between your colors. You should be getting, you know, different shades. It's going to come together. Always looks kind of meh at first. Now I might go darker. So if I use more blue, I'll get a darker shade of green. And then I might want to just kind of pull that through a bit. Maybe you can redefine some of your little first lines, like the little stems that we did, the guiding lines for where the pines kind of come out of. You can always repaint those a little bit, and then you can just add some of that darker shade into there. Because we want at least 3 shades. That's just a minimum. Anything more than that is a bonus, but you definitely don't want less than that because it will then look really flat. And so sometimes people are afraid to let those colors shine through, or when they're layering, they layer and they cover over their other layers so much that it just looks like one shade again. So be careful. Make sure as you're layering that each color still has its voice and you're not completely drowning it out. I do that sometimes too. So see, then I can go in and maybe make a lighter shade with more white added. So just make as many different shades as you can and layer some of that in there. Maybe I want a little more yellow. You know, you gotta, and then I always like to try to spread whatever color I mix. I try to spread it about a little bit so that each color has some, you know, a voice across the whole design. So I don't just add one shade over here and just put it there. I put it throughout the whole thing. And just make sure, you know, you have those little kind of things pulling out, little feathering. And try to relax while you're painting. Don't fight with it. Just let whatever's coming out of your hand come out of your hand and whatever you're seeing. So like as you follow along, you know, what you see, especially if you're doing it with other people, you'll notice everyone's got a different take on what we're looking at here. That's the art of it, that everyone does have a different take. So that's okay. That's the whole point, actually. So I always like to remind people that they're all supposed to look different. That's the beauty of it. It's totally the best part. Now I'm going to go back into my Filbert, the rounded top one, and I'm going to add more layers to my ornaments. Now I want to get some darker layers in there. So for my orange, my darker color is just going to look like adding more red to my orange. So if I add a lot of red to the orange, it might still look orangish, but it has a lot more red, so it looks darker than my first shade, which is right here. First shade, darker shade. And then I'm going to go ahead and put that around the edges, underneath the little cap thing. Maybe not all the way around the edges, and then some little brush strokes towards the bottom, like that. And then for the yellow, it's going to look like orange as well. So I'm going to do a little bit around that under here, a little bit on the side, and coming down underneath. Now for my red, since it's already kind of red, I'm going to have to kick it up a notch with my shading. So I'm going to have to clean it. I'm going to clean it. We're going to go into like a little bit of a different vibe to get those darker shades. But what I'm going to do is use some purple. So I'm going to use mostly red with just a little bit of blue added. Oop, that was a lot of blue, actually. I always say do a little bit, and then I always do too much. So just add more red if you need to, but it should look kind of like a warm purple or a burgundy red. And then this is going to be some of the shading I do here. So see how I'm going along the left edge? Underneath this little deal on the right, and just right through the middle. So now we have a little bit more depth to those shapes. Still looking kind of, you know. But to create even more shadow on these two, I could use some of that burgundy. There's nothing wrong with that. So I might come in and add a little bit of that onto my yellow too. And my orange. Because it's going to give me more of a shadow. Don't go too crazy because we still want it to look predominantly orange and yellow. So see how we've got those nice, it's so rough right now. It's probably going to stay pretty rough. And then we can also draw our little string coming down, which I'm going to use like a blue black. So just use a little bit of black and blue maybe with a little bit of white for that. So it's like a darkish, grayish, bluish. It shouldn't be as dark as the background though. So be careful not to make it too dark. Should be like grayish blue. It's just blue, white, and black. And then we're going to draw little lines coming from the top of the ornaments just all the way up. This one's going to be kind of more like, it's not going to go all the way up. Maybe it's like behind that a little bit, but this one I'll take all the way up. Just vertical lines. And then maybe you can switch to that smaller brush again. We want to use some of that darker blue-gray color, the same color we were just using. It should look darker than the top of the ornament. I'm going to add a little bit of that on the left of the ornament top. Just a little bit, and maybe even on the bottom. So it's like a little bit on this side and then a little bit on the bottom. I'm just barely touching the side, and then use the corner and just sort of drag it under. Notice how now it looks like it has more than one shade. You really got to do that when you're painting. You got to make sure. And then with that little brush, I'm still using it. I want to create like a blue-green. So cleaning it, I'm going to use mostly blue and white with a little bit of yellow. So see, I'm mixing it into the green, more like a turquoise. And then I really want to get some bright turquoise little things in here. And I decided spreading the love, getting it all around. And you can even use that color a little bit to soften. So see if I mix it into my blue-gray, or I just have like maybe a little extra white in there. I can use that on the top of my ornaments too, like right by the shadow, to add another shade. As many as possible is good. And I'm just adding it to the left side. Now I really want to jazz up the ornaments a little more. I'm going to start adding some more color, more layers, and eventually we'll add some highlights. So what I want to do here is I'm just going to clean the filbert here and take the pure red. Maybe just a tad of white, not too much. Just the pure red. I'm going to go in here and I want to soften the shadows a bit by pulling this paint right along the edges of the shadow. Now I can use some of this red on the yellow ornament and the orange ornament to soften the shadows just a little bit. Sometimes I like to go in and just sort of adjust it. And then I can go in with more yellow and maybe more white to create another shade here. And then I can layer that in on the yellow. Maybe even a little bit on the bottom of this red. See how I can just put a sweep in that color? You want so many colors. It's the more the merrier. We're not being greedy here with the colors. We want to let all these colors dance on that shape so that it really has more interest and more going on. You don't want it to be too flat looking. That's not exciting. It's not fun to look at. So I can always go in and add more yellow. I want this to have more yellow. This can have more yellow. Swoosh it in. Really just as many colors as you can get in there. And then if your brush gets out of control, you know, clean it. But see how the more I add to that, the more it kind of comes to life. I want to get more pinks in this one though. So I'm going to use my white a little more liberally with that red. And notice I clean my brush if I want to change the direction I'm going with my colors, because it can be a little tricky if you have too much paint on your brush. But see how I can come in and dab some of that lighter shade towards the center. A little more pinkish. And I can even use some of that pink on my yellow or my orange. So these colors, what's fun about this ornament painting is that these colors can do that. They can kind of, you know, they go well together. So you can let them dance throughout. And then I want to go even lighter. So now I'm going to add some highlights. Now my highlights can go in with this here. I'm just going to use pure white. And I'm going to go towards the center of the shape and just dab and kind of wiggle to get it in there. Go towards the center and just kind of let it spread like randomly from that center space. White, and then dab towards the center. And then if you want, you can switch over to like a smaller round brush, something small, and you can use the white to almost outline the shapes a little bit. So I can go in and kind of just lightly, very lightly outline the ornament. So light. And maybe not all the way. This can be kind of sparse, but see how it could help divide this ornament from that one by giving a little bit of a highlight along the left side. I like to barely touch to the point where you can see the line pick up. It's not a solid line. This is what makes things look kind of sparkly. If you do a solid thick line, it won't look as shiny. So just keep that in mind. You can always paint things over with the black or the color. And then while you have this small brush in, you can go in and kind of highlight the right side of the top of the ornament. Make sure that looks like nice and bright. I'm not covering over all the layers, though. I'm just adding to the side of it. And then you can highlight your little string that's holding the ornament on the tree. So going vertically. Beautiful. And then you can highlight your pines, like little light lines like that. Maybe not too many, but you can do a couple. You don't want to go crazy with that because it can kind of take away from other things. And we're going to do a bunch of little dots and some other techniques, but I want to make sure I have a little bit more shadow in here. Now, to create more shadow, I'm just going to go back to that purple. So see how we have those highlights in there? Those highlights are nice and fun, making it look so cool. I love it. Now I'm just going to go in and add more. Like I'm using that small brush. Use your purple, which is the red and the blue. Maybe about 50-50. We really want a dark shadow here. And I'm going to go in, like, for example, I can go to the bottom of this yellow ornament and do some little dark streaks. It's kind of cool. So, or just, you know, streaks on the shape. Maybe a little bit on the orange. You really want to make sure you have dark and light. It's really important to the whole look of anything. You've got to have dark and light. So see, I'm just enhancing that shadow. I'm going to enhance the shadow over here a little bit. You can even use this shadow color to kind of tone down some of your highlights around the edges if you need to. And then I want to go underneath the ornament and almost make like a little smiley face, little wiggly lines painting across. So if I go in there and go across like this, I'm just making little smiley faces with that shadow to make it look rippled at the bottom. And I am such a loose painter. It's just my style. So if you're getting really perfectionist-y, that's okay, but just know that it could still work in a more loose fashion because it works for me. Like I feel like it works, like it has a style and it looks kind of fun. So, you know, you can add as many of those shadows as you want, like to just beef it up a little bit and make it look more in depth. You cannot leave out the shadows. People are afraid to put the shadows in, is what I find. But don't be afraid of the shadows. It's really what makes the highlights make more sense. So it's only giving more life to your painting. So, you know, consider that. Consider the life of it. So we have the highlights in the middle, kind of going through a little bit. Now let's go crazy. We're gonna do some dotting. I love doing this. And you can use like a larger brown brush if you want, or you can just use the small one. It doesn't really matter. This is just going to be a starting point using these brushes. I'll grab a bigger one just to save my arm. And I'm just going to use white and yellow. You can even, you know, it could be any color. It could be pink. It could be, but use a little bit of white mixed into whatever color you want to do. You could do this with blue. I'm doing white and yellow. And then I'm going to find some spots where I want to make it look like glowing light. I'm just going to put a little dot with that paint. And then I'm going to take my finger and then rub out like that. And that is it. You can do it a couple times, especially if you want to make it bigger. If it's not standing out enough, add more white. But so I'm going to add some over here. Just make a little dot and then rub it with your finger. I rub in a circle and then I radiate out until it blurs. So the more paint I start off with, the bigger my finished orb is going to be. The less I start out with, the smaller it will be. So decide, you know, do you want a big one? If yes, use more to start. If you want a tiny one, use less to start. I like to get at least 3 sizes, just like the shades. And I'm just doing it throughout, around in the really empty space that we have in the background. So might want to even add a little more white to some of mine here. They can overlap on the pine a little bit. No big deal. And you can even just dip your finger and then smudge it that way. I just find it's a little harder to control how much paint you have if you dip your finger directly in, so just be careful with that. But sometimes I do it, especially if I'm like wanted to go a little faster, or if I know I'm doing a lot of big ones. And you can always use one finger, like use your pointer finger to dab it, and then use your other finger, like your middle finger, to rub it. That way you have a little more control over the amount of paint. And then, you know, again, maybe more white. So I can do like another layer on some, or you can just do some in different shades so that all of your little orbs don't look the same shade. You want to get a few different shades. So I'm going to do some with yellow and white, and then some with more white. And then I'm even going to do some that are more like pink-ish. So just notice how as I layer in the different shades, it just begins to look a little bit more magical and fun. And that's just the way it is with painting. And then maybe I'll go in and add some pink dots. Now these can be just more like dots, you know, they don't all have to be rubbed out like that to make them look radiating, but they can be. But I could just take the small round brush and use some pink and then go in and begin to make little dots. And they can overlap on the green, which I really want to do. They can overlap on the yellow dots. And I'm making these ones kind of big, just for fun. You can always use the pink on your ornaments as you go through to add a little more highlights if you want. So sometimes when I have a color on my brush, I kind of spread it around a little bit just to, you know, give it some love, just to use it while I have it on there. And then once we've got enough pink dots, we can just do white dots. So white dots is just going to be going straight into the white and then just dotting. I'm going to make these ones a little smaller. And they're just overlapping everything. They can even go on top of the ornaments. And then we can make some sparkles too. And you can leave any of these things out. Maybe you want it to be a little more simple. I just feel like this really pumps it up a bit. It gives it a little more oomph, which I like to add to my paintings. Because something that goes from looking kind of flat can really end up looking much more sparkly and fun if you just do a little extra of this kind of thing. You can even go in and add, like maybe I'll go in and add more yellowish kind of color on with white onto my pines. So, you know, with the white and yellow. So maybe that looks like a highlight color. So this is just like highlighting. You're adding more colors. You're adding more elements that are like really light. So the sparkles, the dots, all that stuff is just, it's just like a highlight. And against this black canvas, it's really important because it helps create more contrast. And I can kind of go back and forth. And then you can make little sparkles. So if you want to make little sparkles, this part's really fun. I like doing this. You can go ahead and add like, oh, basically just start with your white. And then I can go like maybe, for example, right here on this darker part, make a dot. And then you're just going to pull up, down, right, left. And then you can do a little X through it as well to make a little sparkle. So you kind of get these little twinkles going on. And you can do them anywhere. I'm going to do them a little bit on top of the ornaments. And then you can do them on top of the pine as well. Need some little dots. So, you know, then you're just going in and, you know, enhancing and adding little twinkles, adding little dots, adding maybe more shadows, adding maybe more pink, adding, you know, really whatever your painting needs. I can't emphasize enough that it's going to be different for everybody, what your painting needs at the end of the day. Some people are going to need less, some people are going to need more, and it depends on what you want to see on your painting. So don't feel like you have to do what I'm doing, but it is going to help to try to at least get the gist of it, the elements, the ideas on there, but do it in your own way. Make sure you're having fun. We're just doing this for fun. They always turn out different. So this one's getting really, you know, sparkly. They all have different levels of sparkle. And then I like to show this in the end of a black canvas painting. You can take like either a medium or large brush or whatever you want to do. And you can always take your black paint and you can like reverse engineer. So maybe I get too many pine, and there's not enough black in my painting anymore or something like that. If it gets crowded out, go reverse. You can just go in and kind of paint over with the black. Be careful with this though, because you might be nitpicking over something that really doesn't look bad. But I do it just a little bit to make sure it's not too clustered, and to clean up any lines that, or smudges or anything like that, that didn't really do what I wanted it to do. So that's there for you. I like to just show that. It's one of my things I like about a black canvas painting, is that you can go in and do that. Whereas with other paintings, it's a lot harder to do that because you don't have that black canvas, and the black is so easy to paint over things. So you can kind of reverse your pine. You can cover over any of these little dots that maybe didn't do what you wanted them to do. You can clean up the edges of your ornaments or your ornament tops. If it got a little crazy, you can always clean up your, you know, highlights. Really just anything. I like to kind of just double check and make sure I'm not too crowded with the light colors, because it can do that. And you want those dark colors too. You don't want it so crowded out that you're and you can make those look a little pointier. You know, there's so many things you can do. Just imagine it like carving. You're carving back into the shapes if you need to. Again, maybe you don't even want to do this part. I'm just showing you that you can, so that you don't panic and you're not like, oh my gosh, I got too much of this, or that dot didn't turn out right. Don't even worry about it. It's not anything to worry about, really, I promise. And then you can always go back and forth as much as you want, getting different shades, getting different, just anything, you know, until you're happy with it. But at some point you do have to say that you're done and just be like, okay, I'm good. That's about as good as it's going to get for the moment. You know, you can always add more, but this is a fun little ornament painting. You can put on your mantle. You can put it in a little frame for the holidays to have in your house to add some personalized decoration. But I hope you had fun painting. Make sure to like and subscribe, because I know it sounds kind of corny, but it really does help get more views, and that in turn helps what all of the efforts that we make to make the videos, which take a lot of time and energy. So it helps support me as an artist, and I really appreciate that. But also share what you created. You can always reach out to me on my website, which is hello@wendyAnderson.art. That's my email. And then the website is just wendyAnderson.art. So you can go to my website and check out more offerings that I have. I have full acrylic courses and all sorts of good stuff that you can join, monthly painting memberships where you actually get to kind of sit down with me in a more personal Bob Ross way and paint some paintings. So I hope to see you for some of those fun activities, but mainly I hope you got to be creative. Maybe you surprised yourself, and mainly you just had fun. But have a beautiful day.